You know, we've all been there. As a designer, you spend weeks, maybe months, perfecting a user interface. It's clean, it's beautiful, and then users completely ignore a key feature. Why does that happen? Well, it's because we often design for how we wish people would behave, not how they actually do. So in this explainer, we're going to get real. We're diving deep into the psychology that truly drives product success, giving you the tools to design for actual human behavior.
This quote right here, this is everything. Seriously. Shipping the new feature? Yeah, that gets you a high five in the team meeting. It feels great. But the real, long-term value, the thing that builds an iconic, unforgettable product, is getting users to come back, day after day. Retention is the name of the game. And that whole game just boils down to motivation minus friction.
And here's the hard truth for a lot of product teams. We design for these perfectly rational robots. We expect our users to read every single word, carefully weigh every option, and make these super logical choices. But our users, they're human. They're driven by emotions, by habits, by all these quirky cognitive biases. And the moment you truly get that, the second you grasp this fundamental disconnect, you start designing in a completely different and way more effective way.
Okay, so how do we actually bridge that gap? How do we connect the rational product we build with the emotional human who uses it? Well, you need a framework. You need a powerful, unified equation that helps you decode and actually influence user behavior. This is the key. This is how we start to solve that retention problem. This whole approach has a name. It's called behavioral UX design. And let's be clear, this is not about just making screens look pretty. It's about engineering experiences with the user's mind as your primary blueprint. It's a design process that respects all the cognitive, emotional, and social stuff that influences every single click and tap.
And this is our master key. This simple equation synthesizes some of the most powerful models in behavioral science, from B.J. Fogg's famous model to Nir Eyal's hooked framework. It basically tells us that a desired behavior that happens when motivation, ability, and a trigger are all present, and they're strong enough to overcome any friction that's standing in the way. So let's break that down.
All right, so think about it like this. A desired behavior happens when a user has enough motivation and the ability to act. They get a little nudge from a trigger, and all of that is enough to overcome the friction. So your job as a designer is to start thinking like an engineer of this very equation. You want to crank up the motivation and the triggers while making the ability totally effortless and just ruthlessly eliminating friction. So let's start with that first part of the equation. How in the world do we actually engineer desire? How do we make actions feel completely effortless? And look, this isn't about guesswork or, just making it pop. This is about applying proven psychological patterns directly to your work. This is such a fantastic example of the power of framing. So Uber Eats found that telling users they were missing out on a $12 reward was 2.4 times more effective than telling them they could earn it. This is a classic cognitive bias called loss aversion. Humans are just wired to avoid pain more than they seek pleasure. So as a designer, this means your copy, your UI choices, they have a massive impact on motivation. So ask yourself, are you framing your value as a potential gain or as a way to avoid a painful loss? The data is pretty clear on which one works better.
And here's another key principle for you. Similarity beats magnitude. The finance app Chime discovered that telling users people like you were saving money was way more persuasive than just throwing a giant anonymous number at them, like 1.3 million. And why is that? It's because we're tribal creatures. We trust and we emulate people who feel like they're part of our group. It just makes the behavior feel more relevant and, maybe most importantly, more achievable for us.
Okay, so we've engineered some motivation. Awesome. Now let's talk about ability. Making something easy isn't just about reducing the number of clicks. Your number one job here, your absolute main focus, is to reduce the mental effort, the cognitive load that it takes for a user to make a decision and take action.
This right here is Hick's Law. And honestly, it should be every designer's best friend when you're arguing for simplicity. The data could not be clearer. More choices lead to slower decisions and more mistakes. So, next time you're in a design review and someone suggests adding another button just in case, you can be the one to ask, hey, is this feature really worth the 150 milliseconds of user frustration and the 3% increase in errors it's going to cause? Every single element on your screen has a cost.
So we've got a motivated user, we've got an action that's easy to do. The final piece of the puzzle is the trigger. This is the spark. It's the prompt that kicks off the behavior, and when you combine it with a reward, it becomes the engine that turns a one-time action into a lasting, valuable habit.
Now, we have a few different types of triggers. You've got external ones, like a push notification, which are the ones we explicitly build. But the holy grail, the ultimate goal of product design, is to attach your product to an internal trigger, a feeling like boredom or loneliness or uncertainty. And here's the pro move. You time your external trigger to land just before you predict that internal itch is going to pop up. You're basically piggybacking on an urge that's already there.
And here is how you supercharge those triggers. Variable rewards. Think about it. When you check Slack, you don't know if you'll have 1 mention or 14. That complete unpredictability creates this powerful dopamine loop that just compels you to check again and again. It's the exact same mechanism that makes slot machines so addictive. And for Slack, it drove a whopping 31% increase in daily checks.
Now look, this power to influence behavior, it comes with a huge responsibility. We are walking a very, very fine line between motivation and manipulation. And as designers, we have to be so vigilant about which side of that line our work falls on.
Here is the ethical litmus test for any design decision you ever make. Ask yourself this. If you explain the psychological principle you're using directly to a user, would they thank you for making their life better, or would they feel kind of gross and manipulated? If you are not 100% certain the answer is thank you, then you are on very thin ice. And you know what? We can even measure this. TikTok actually experimented with an onboarding flow that was super successful at increasing session length, but it also led to this massive spike in user regret 30 days later. And wisely, they chose to scrap it. Measuring long-term regret is just a fantastic way to make sure you're building a product people genuinely feel good about using, not just one they can't seem to stop. So, what does this all mean for you? It means reframing your entire role. You are not just pushing pixels around. You're not just arranging components on a screen. You are an architect of human behavior.
So here's your new toolkit. Your core job is retention. That's just motivation minus friction. Use that behavioral equation B equals M plus A plus T minus F to guide every single decision. Engineer motivation using proven principles like loss aversion. Maximize a user's ability by simplifying everything. Build habits with smart triggers and variable rewards. And always apply that manipulation test to make sure you are empowering your users, not exploiting them.
And I'll leave you with this final thought. It's a bit of a challenge. Are you just making things look pretty, or are you truly understanding the deep psychological drivers of your users? The moment you start thinking about cortisol and dopamine and oxytocin, that's when you finally move from being a decorator to being a true behavior.